Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and I am here to introduce you to college admissions representatives and other professionals in the field of college admissions. Our purpose is to serve you, the students and parents, so that you may gain insight straight from the people who ultimately make the decisions. Regardless of whether you apply to a particular school being highlighted in a given episode, you should listen to all of them, as each guest will give you tremendous insight and advice on every aspect of the college admissions process, prompting you to come up with your own follow-up questions for when you visit campus or meet with a college admissions representative yourself. Don't forget to visit our website, www.collegeadmissionstalk.com, or the show notes of each episode to access the alphabetical list of all the colleges available with the related audio link to the right of each school. The alphabetical list provides you with on-demand access to all of the episodes so that you may listen whenever you wish. And if you want to receive links to episodes before they are released on the podcast, along with other related resources, please fill out the email opt-in form also available on our website and in the show notes of each episode. Lastly, please email me with any questions or comments at collegeadmissionstalk@gmail.com. So are you ready? Let's talk about it. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome back Arianna Yarritu Rabinowitz, who's the Associate Director of Admissions at NYU, that's New York University. Arianna was here also for episode number 28. She also appeared in episode 146 as part of our Playback Wednesdays back in the summer because she got the most overall downloads. So Arianna, it is an honor and pleasure to have you back. Welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, John. Thanks so much for having me back. I'm so excited to be here. It's a really fun time of year for us in admissions. We are really hunkering down, getting ready to review all of your applications and get to really begin to meet our class. I work with our artistic departments here on campus, and yesterday I got to go observe our dance auditions on campus. It's a really exciting time of year for us as we're bringing students new violets to campus to welcome them to the NYU community.
That is awesome. And I know how busy you are. I had the great honor and pleasure of actually seeing you at the NACAC National Conference down in Baltimore. So it was great to see you there, Arianna. And again, we really appreciate your time today. So the first thing I want to tell the listeners is that if they haven't heard episode 28, whether or not they intend on applying to NYU or not, there was so many great pieces of information shared there that I highly encourage everyone to listen to episode 28, even though that episode was recorded over a year ago at this point. So having said that, Arianna, let me start by asking you, for those listeners who didn't hear our first episode, again, 28, can you give us a brief overview of what is it about NYU that makes it so appealing for so many students to want to apply and ultimately attend?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the things that I love so much about working at NYU and why I'm so proud to be part of the NYU community. There's a lot going on our campus in New York City, but also across all of our campuses across the world. So even though we are New York University and people typically think of NYU and think New York, we're not just in New York City. We have our largest and oldest of our degree granting campuses, of course, in New York, primarily in Manhattan, but then also in Brooklyn as well for most of our technology-focused programs, with about 29,000 undergraduate students, about 60 to 70,000 students total that are studying in New York City. But we're not just in New York. We have two other degree-granting campuses, one in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates and one in Shanghai in China. These are both smaller, liberal arts college style institutions, about 2,000 students total at each of them, primarily undergraduates, so a few graduate programs at each of them as well. But there are American style liberal arts colleges in these incredible cities in different parts of the world. So if you want to have that opportunity to study away, not just for a semester or a year, but for your full 4 years, then NYU Abu Dhabi or NYU Shanghai are really wonderful institutions to consider studying at. And in addition to our 3 degree granting campuses, NYU also operates 12 other global academic centers all across the world. So these are study away sites exclusively for NYU students where they can go for a semester, an academic year, a summer, a January term. Lots of flexibility there for our students to be able to have those global experiences and really become these global citizens. That's one of the big things that we really, really value at NYU. Developing leaders and thinkers and doers and artists and engineers and business people and social workers and all these different people who have this global perspective and are really going to implement that at the work that they're doing. So they're bringing that global lens to the local problems that they're solving in their day-to-day lives. So that's one of the things I think makes NYU so exciting and so appealing, that opportunity to have that truly international lens. But then also some of the things that make our community so interesting. In New York City alone, we have about 230 different majors for our students to choose from that are organized across our 10 undergraduate schools. You can take classes across all 10 undergraduate schools, including in our artistic programs and our business programs and our School of Engineering. There's a lot of academic flexibility that students find very appealing and makes them want to come and join our community at NYU. And then I think lastly, of course, for those who choose to study in New York City, it's New York. There's really nothing like it. Even just yesterday, like I mentioned, I was on campus for our dance auditions, but then my coworker and I had lunch at the new Wegmans that just opened right by campus, which we're very excited about in my office. We grabbed our lunch there at the hot bar. We were sitting outside, and then we saw our colleagues from the film and TV department on campus, and we were just chatting with them. And so that energy of being in the city, having these opportunities to go to movie premieres, to go to Broadway shows, to go to incredible museums, great restaurants, sporting events, all of that comes with being in New York. I think that is one of the things that makes it so appealing for our students, that energy and that excitement. And as you know, John, our campus is a truly urban campus, meaning that all of our academic buildings and dorms and the library and the dining halls, the student centers, as you're walking between them, you're walking city streets. And so that constant injection of energy is something that I don't think any other school can do like NYU can.
Well, being a New Yorker myself, I absolutely know that the city never sleeps. And I love how you talked about NYU's global brand. It's definitely something that you emphasize in episode 28. Obviously, you have your campus in Manhattan, Brooklyn, Abu Dhabi, China, and the fact that you have 230 majors, 10 different undergraduate schools. Obviously, you have something for everyone, Arianna. And I also remember that the last time we spoke, you talked about the fact that you had just over 100,000 applications submitted to NYU. So, Arianna, since our first episode together, have there been any significant changes in your overall application process?
Yes. So we had 100,000 applications for the fall of 2022. For the fall of 2023, we had just shy of 120,000 applications.
Wow.
That's to all 3 of our degree granting campuses. Yes, I know. There's nothing you can really do but sort of giggle. I think we did too good of a job on the podcast, John. Maybe we should not do as good of a job this time. So it was really is exciting for us. It was a lot of work that goes into reviewing those applications. It means that sometimes you have to make really difficult decisions for really deserving students. That allows us to be able to create this community of learners and thinkers and doers and creatives who come together to make a difference at NYU and will make a difference beyond NYU as well.
Well, we appreciate that. And obviously, we talked about the fact that there truly is something for everyone at NYU in your classrooms and beyond. You also spoke about how, of course, NYU has 10 schools and how students are admitted by academic program. So, Ariana, are there significant differences when applying to one program over the other, such as having to submit a portfolio or being required to be interviewed? Again, any insight that you could provide would be greatly appreciated.
The only time students would have additional application requirements would be for our students who are applying to artistic programs at NYU. So that's going to include all of our programs in the Tisch School of the Arts, and then our music-based programs in the Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development, which is also where you'll find our studio art program. For all of those majors, there is either a portfolio that is required as part of the process. Some of them have a pre-screening where you then might be invited to audition either live on campus, or some of them also have the opportunity for you to do a virtual or digital audition. For some of our programs, like our production and design or directing studios in the drama department and Tisch, there's also an interview that's part of that sort of audition process. So there are different components that are required for our artistic applicants. You can see exactly what those components are on the major that you're interested in's website. So please be diligent and be doing that research so that you know exactly what's going to be expected of you. We also, John, really encourage our artistic applicants to submit their Common App 2 weeks to a month, preferably a month in advance of the application deadlines. That way they are not stressed out about trying to submit their artistic materials. Many of the artistic materials have to be uploaded through a student's applicant portal. They will not have access to their applicant portal typically for 3 to 4 days after they submit the application. So if you are submitting the application on January 1st for a January 1st early decision deadline, you really don't have a lot of leeway to be able to submit those artistic materials. So please be on top of those deadlines and really ahead of those deadlines so that you're not stressed. We're not stressed. The department isn't stressed trying to get you reviewed for the artistic piece that you're interested in. For all of our other programs on campus, there's no additional application pieces. There's no interviews that are offered at NYU. We do not accept portfolios from students who are not applying to artistic programs. So there's nothing beyond what we require, which would be, the common application, one letter of recommendation, your transcripts, your self-reported academic record, and the school report from your high school. Beyond that, we're not requiring anything else for students. The only exception to that rule being students for whom English is not their first language. They may need to submit some kind of English language testing to us. If you have any questions about our English language testing policy, you can see that all on our website. The only other things to know for our review process are a little bit sort of school-specific subject requirements. The most competitive applicants to our Stern School of Business are going to have taken calculus or the most competitive math available to them at their high school. Students who are interested in our Tandon School of Engineering, the most competitive of those applicants typically are going to have calculus, chemistry, and physics. And then students who are interested in our College of Nursing, the most competitive applicants are typically going to have chemistry and have done well in their science coursework.
Well, we appreciate that insight, obviously, in terms of the science coursework there. I also just want to go back. You mentioned the SRAR. Now, our listeners are very sophisticated, and I know that most of them know exactly what that is. But could you just explain it a little bit, Arianna, for those of you that might not know?
Sure, absolutely. So the self-reported academic record, or the SRAR, is a tool that is beginning to be more and more common for colleges and universities to request. This is a way where you help the university understand your transcript by standardizing it for us. Transcripts, you would be surprised, students, how many different ways a school can create a transcript. And so the SRAR just makes it a little bit easier, especially for a school like NYU that is receiving over 100,000 applications, to be able to process the application materials more easily, because it allows us to see everybody on a sort of standard playing field, on an even playing field. And so the self-reported academic record is really helpful for us to have. You can create your SRAR account at any point, and you typically can use that one account to send to multiple schools. But essentially what will happen after you submit the common application, you'll get access to your applicant portal like we just talked about for our artistic students. But through the applicant portal, you can access this self-reported academic record. So from right there's a big button in your portal that will say log into SRAR. You'll click that button. You can at that point link your pre-existing SRAR account if you already have one, or create an account for the first time and then standardize that transcript for us. It typically can take about an hour to do, so just set that time aside so that you can help us out with understanding your transcript better.
Well, we appreciate that overview, and I also appreciate you talking about the English language testing policy and all of the deadlines for your different schools and opportunities for students. Obviously, students and parents, it's very important to be mindful of going to NYU's website, which always gives the latest and greatest information. Arianna, if there are any links that you want me to share in the show notes, obviously just send them to me and we'll make them available to the students and their parents, of course, in the show notes. Now, being from New York, I know a lot of amazing students that graduated NYU, some that are still there, and I know how highly academic NYU is. So, Arianna, could you share any specific success stories or experiences of NYU students that truly exemplify the unique opportunities your university offers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have such a dynamic and diverse student body at NYU. There's so many different things our students are getting into. I think some of the really special ones are, of course, our experiences to study abroad and study globally. We just heard this morning from the Stern School of Business about their brand new global requirement that every student at Stern will have to have some kind of global experience
Wow.
before they graduate, whether that's studying away for a year, a semester. They can take part in a class that has a global component to it, maybe a January term trip or a spring break trip, a May trip. Where they're going to different countries beyond where NYU has global sites. So some of those student trips have gone to Costa Rica, to Mexico City, to Japan, to Singapore. So really exciting opportunities for our students to be able to have these global experiences through their studies. Another really fun opportunity outside of NYU's already developed global network, students in our classics program in our College of Arts and Science have the opportunity to be able to study away in Greece for 6 weeks in the summer at not a super formal study away site, but one that is continuing to become more and more popular for our students. So those global experiences, I think, are definitely a real hallmark of the student experiences at NYU. But then also really important are the kinds of professional opportunities our students are having to both work at incredible companies in New York. So I'm thinking of some of our sports management students who, one in particular who's been interning at Madison Square Garden for the last 3 years as part of her studies. Thinking about students who intern at NBC Universal, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, at Vogue, at all sorts of different, big entities in New York City. But then also our students who are creating new ideas at NYU. Since 2018, NYU startups that have been supported by our entrepreneurship lab on campus have raised over $1 billion
Wow.
as part of their growth as companies. Some of the biggest ones, of course, being Brooklinen. That's a company that is founded by 2 NYU alums. And one that is a newer startup that is coming out of our campus is called Ephemeral Tattoo. This is founded by some Tandon students working in conjunction with some Stern students. They have designed tattoo ink that fades over time, so you can
Oh,
get
wow.
a permanent tattoo and that you have it for a few years. But then it eventually fades. If you're not quite sure if you want to commit, I think it is so cool. And there's so much that is going on campus to secure those opportunities. Actually, my husband is a graduate student right now at NYU in Tisch. And he literally, as we speak, is downstairs taking part in a startup boot camp through the
Wow.
entrepreneurship lab on campus. So that support for students is available across all levels at NYU. And I want to say too, the global experiences are available across all levels at NYU as well. He's getting to go to Berlin in January and Shanghai next summer as part of his graduate degree. So really excited for what NYU provides for students.
Well, that's terrific. And of course, you mentioned the dynamic and diverse experiences and opportunities that you offer all of your students. internships, of course, being in the great city of New York. But you also mentioned that how Stern has a requirement where there be a global experience, which I think is phenomenal, emphasizing further NYU's global brand. Now,
Yeah.
Ariana, the last time, I'm sorry, were you saying something?
Yeah, and that's not just Stern. There are so many different majors that require studying abroad for our students. Students in our global liberal studies major will spend the entirety of their junior year abroad. Students and even internships are required as part of our different student experiences. Music technology, for example, every student has to complete an internship before they graduate. So these built-in requirements are there to help make sure that our students have that real world experience that we know makes them more successful in the job marketplace after graduating, and also allows them to bring those outside experiences back to NYU and to enrich our community and the classroom conversations that are happening on our campus.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Ariana. And the last time you did a great job on many things, including talking about recommendation letters. So, could you elaborate on the specific factors or qualities that your admissions team looks for in those recommendation letters? And are there any recent examples where recommendation letters played a pivotal role in a decision?
So for us at NYU, we're a very academically driven review process. So all the other pieces of the application beyond your transcript, like your letters of recommendation, your essay, extracurricular activities, those are important to us as we're thinking about creating our community. And so letters of recommendation are a part of that. We want to see that a student is a good classmate, is a good friend to others, knows how to sort of pick themselves up when they maybe aren't super successful the first time around. That's a really important skill at a school like NYU that is so big, and in a city like New York that is also so big. And so those are the kinds of things that we are looking for in letters of recommendation. In I think since we've last spoken, we changed our letter of recommendation requirements. So now at NYU, we only require one letter of recommendation, and that can come from anybody who's in a position of authority in your life. So that can be a teacher or a counselor, sort of the usual suspects that we might think of, but also can come from a faith leader, from a supervisor at a part-time job, from a coach, from somebody who you volunteer for. It cannot come from a friend. It cannot come from your parent, but somebody else in your life who's in this formal position of authority. And so you have this opportunity to tell us something about yourself beyond academics, beyond just what we would see in your essay. So again, we only require one letter, and we'll accept up to 3 letters of recommendation on your behalf. Beyond that, we really don't need any additional letters beyond that.
Well, that's awesome, man. You're emphasizing today, and again, back in episode 28, that you are, in fact, highly academic. So, of course, the transcript is something really important in your overall application review because you're looking at the rigor or not in terms of what the student took, how they challenged themselves over their 4 years of high school. But you also said something related to the recommendation letters, how you're trying to create your community. So it's very important, students, to understand that by the time you're sending in your application, and this is something you mentioned last time, Ariana, the transcript is pretty much done. You know, when you're submitting your application at the end of junior year, at the beginning of senior year, you know, that transcript is basically done. But who you ask for a letter of recommendation and who's going to emphasize the type of community member that you would be once on NYU's campus, that's something that you should be very mindful of. You also did a great job last time talking about your supplemental and how it's important for a student to really demonstrate their understanding of NYU, perhaps talk about that global recognition and incorporate it somehow in that supplemental, but also talking about not only your demonstrated interest of NYU, but how you yourself intend to contribute to this awesome community that we know NYU is, not only here in New York, but globally. So I also heard, ironically, Ariana, that your supplemental essay, it's no longer the question, why NYU? It's a little different. There's been some changes. So can you share with us what the changes are, and any other insight would be greatly appreciated?
Absolutely. I've got to say, John, it's so surreal to hear you quote me back to me.
Well, I have to
um,
interrupt you there for 1 second and tell you that, again, not only were you episode 28, but you were replayed in the summertime for our Playback Wednesday series because your episode was one of those episodes that really got a tremendous number of downloads. And I'm going to say it again because regardless of whether someone is applying to NYU or not, that episode 28, I think, is so important to just listen. And by the way, don't listen to me because I was awful. Okay. I was kind of new in this podcast thing. But you, Arianna, were just so insightful about recommendation letters and, your testing policies and what to do and not to do that I think it's really important for people to just listen to it. So back to the original question. Tell us about the changes in your supplemental.
So we do have a new supplemental question this year. And I think in part it really is reflective of how NYU is in our new sort of a new era. We have a new president at NYU as of this summer, Linda Mills. She is a longtime member of the NYU community. She is a social worker by training, but then also has a JD. So she is this incredible thinker who's really intersectional and bringing all these different ideas together. So this is an incredibly educated woman that we are so excited to have leading us at NYU. And she has been a big part of coming up and approving this question. So we have 5 different quotes that students can choose between. These are quotes from recent NYU commencement speakers. These include Jay Human, who is a disability rights activist, Sanna Marin, who's the former Prime Minister of Finland, of course, Taylor Swift, who was our class of 2022 commencement speaker. So really incredible people who have come to speak at NYU and speak to our graduates. Some quotes that are mostly from their NYU commencement address that really speak to the values of the university, that speak to the fact that we're really looking for peacemakers, change makers, global citizens, boundary breakers, creatives, and innovators. And so these quotes were selected because they reflect these parts of NYU's values. And a student can respond to the quote and sort of share why it resonates with them, why it inspires them. And a lot of students are taking advantage of this opportunity. I should also say it's an optional supplement. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, though we are seeing that a lot of students are choosing to respond to it, which has been really exciting for us to see as we've been reading the early decision 1 applications. This is a really great opportunity for students to talk about who they envision becoming, the issues that are of importance to them, and really, again, how NYU can help them get there. And how NYU is really going to be able to be that space for them. And so the question has been really, really well received by students, by counselors. We've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from counselors, not just ones that love Taylor Swift, that there certainly have been quite vocal about really liking the question. And we're really excited by some of what we've been seeing when we did our first reader trainings. Everyone was so excited to see the responses to this prompt after working on it for months and months and talking about it on the road with students. So we're really excited for what this is allowing us to see about students and learn about students. Every single piece of your application is precious real estate that you can use to tell us about who you are and who you'd be on our campus. And this supplement is a really wonderful opportunity for students to be able to be dreamers and to think about who they want to be. And we're excited for what that means for our review process.
Well, I think that's a brilliant addition to the overall application. You talked about students. How do you relate to the selected quote from whichever commencement speaker, who you think you want to be in your future? And perhaps the most important part here is how do you see NYU helping you to get there? Right? What is it about one of their schools, one of their programs? So again, to me, Arianna, it points to the importance in this to demonstrate their understanding, not only looking at the quote and how they relate to that quote, who they want to be, perhaps the type of contributor in terms of to the NYU community. But I love that last part that you mentioned. How is NYU going to help you students get there? So again, it talks to that demonstrated understanding. And I keep repeating this because, like you said the last time, and we mentioned earlier, The transcript, when you're submitting applications, it's done. Your grades are your grades. Your activity sheet, guess what? That's pretty much done as well when you're submitting your application. But
Mhm.
the letters of recommendation, your essay, the supplemental, those are things that you really have to focus on as part of that overall application at the time of submitting or the few months leading up to it. Would you agree, Arianna?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much in the application that is already said and done, but these written pieces you still have a lot of control over and a lot of ability to really shape our understanding of you as an applicant and a potential member of our community.
Well, we appreciate that. And last time, Ariana, we also spoke about how NYU is test flexible and how you will accept tests beyond the SAT or ACT, such as AP or IB scores. So, are there any specific AP or IB scores that would be beneficial for students to submit based on their intended program of study?
That is a great question. The only time that we have any sort of preferences or requirements for what kinds of tests students have to send to us is if a student is applying to the Stern School of Business or to the Tandon School of Engineering. If you are applying to either one of these programs and you'd like to use three IB higher level exams as your form of testing, one of those exams does need to be a mathematics exam so that we can have that information. For all students who are choosing to apply with AP scores or IB scores, there are some requirements. One of the exams has to be a humanities exam, and one of the exams has to be a math or science exam. So for the third exam, you can choose if you'd like to send another humanities exam or another math and science exam. Or there are some exams that are not actually listed on what we would qualify as humanities or math and science. Things like an art history exam or psychology. Those are not within what our stated sort of parameters are, but you can send that as your third score. And if you just Google NYU AP tests, the very first link that comes up, if you scroll down to the bottom of that, we actually have listed exactly what is considered a humanities exam and what is considered math and science, and that will be in the show notes for people to be able to see so they know exactly what it is that we require in order for them to apply using the three AP exams or the IB HL exams. Also, I just want to clarify that for the HL exams, we can take predicted scores. For the AP exams, they have to be earned scores. So you can't say, oh, I'm going to be taking Calculus BC May 2024, and I'd like to use that as an exam. That's not an option. There's no predictions that are provided for advanced placement courses, so we can't accept those as part of the application process.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because a follow up was going to be so I know that a lot of students take AP courses. Frankly, they may take some in sophomore year, perhaps more in junior year. But I know that a lot of students are still taking AP courses in their senior year, which obviously they're not going to get their test score until usually the following summer,
Right.
which means that they have already applied. Hopefully, they're accepted. So I guess my question is it true that, when you receive the overall package, you're looking at courses in progress. If students are able to submit scores, they're able to submit scores. But I guess, is there a disadvantage if I'm taking, you mentioned AP art history as a senior? Obviously, I'm not going to be able to submit my score with my application because I haven't taken that exam yet. Is there any kind of disadvantage, or do you look at each student individually? This is what's available. This is what's submitted under their package. Any insight again, Ariana, would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're in AP classes in your senior year, of course, you might not be able to submit those scores as part of the review process for our standardized testing policy. But there's no disadvantage to applying test optional and not submitting any standardized scores to NYU. Whether or not you apply test optional, you'll still be able to submit those scores for credit considerations should you
Right.
be admitted to
Right.
NYU and decide to matriculate.
Good. I appreciate that. And Ariana, could you share some of the resources and support systems NYU offers to assist students, especially those with unique needs like first generation college students, in transitioning from high school to college life?
Yeah, absolutely. NYU is such a diverse community across so many different lenses. There are a significant portion of our student body, I think it's around close to 20%, who are the first in their families to go to college. Many, sort of a similar ish amount, that are also receiving Pell Grants to be able to come to NYU. And so we're really proud to have such a diverse student body. And so we know that it's not enough to just bring those students to campus, but they also need to be supported once they're here. So for us, we have several different kinds of supports for our first generation students in particular. So we have our Proud to Be First mentorship program within our College of Arts and Science. Our Wasserman Center for Career Development does a first class professional development mentorship program for first generation students. So both of these are opportunities for students to connect with other people. We have a focus mentorship group that's sponsored by our Center for Multicultural Education and Programs at NYU. So there's a lot, as you might tell, we have a big emphasis on mentorship at NYU, on helping you find and create meaningful relationships within the NYU community and student body, because we know that for first generation students, that can be something that is really daunting, right? Everybody around them, or it might feel like the people around them have this understanding of college life that they don't have yet. And so mentorship really allows them to be able to have someone to ask, like, hey, what is it that people are talking about? Or how should I go about asking my professor for help during office hours? Or, where did you find a part-time job? Maybe where can I find employment on campus? Do you know of any opportunities like that? So there's a lot of emphasis across the university in creating those kinds of opportunities for meeting other people. We do also have opportunities for first-gen students to live in community with each other. So there's actually 2 residence halls at NYU, one in Washington Square in Manhattan and one in Brooklyn, that have particular floors dedicated to the first-generation experience. So even just getting to live in community with other people who are like you. I think that's a really unique opportunity to have these first-gen living communities on campus as well. So in addition to the finding mentorship through these more formalized opportunities, there's also the space to just live down the hall from other people with a similar experience as you.
Well, that's awesome. And obviously, you have something for everyone at NYU, not only in your classrooms and beyond, which frankly is why your retention rate is so high. And people, once they're accepted, just want to come back year after year. So, Arianna, given your many years of experience, what pitfalls or common misconceptions do you see among students and parents during the application process? And how can they overcome these challenges to increase their chances of success?
This is maybe going to sound a little bit cynical, but I mean it with a lot of love. There is nothing that I have learned more working in college admissions than that everybody thinks that they are the exception, that maybe there's wiggle room to deadlines, that they, can call to ask for a reconsideration of their offer. Um, that, that even if a certain institution has a very selective admit rate, that they're going to be the one that overcomes that. And I want to say with all the love in my heart that that is often not true. And we have so many students who will, or really so many parents who will call us, who are hoping to be able to skirt the rules or the exceptions for their children. And at a school like NYU, that has a kind of applicant pool that we have, that has a large student body, we're the largest private university in the United States, that we're not able to make lots of exceptions, because for us, that's a very, very, very slippery slope to go down. And so we have a lot of policies that we hold very, very firm, because that's what's fair and that is what is equitable to the rest of our applicant pool. And so by that, I really want to emphasize that deadlines are deadlines. At NYU, there is no wiggle room for our financial aid deadline in any way, shape, or form. The deadline is 11:59 Eastern Time. If you do not make it, you are not going to be considered for need-based scholarship at NYU. Need-based scholarship is the only kind of funding that we offer. It's only available to a student if they apply for it in the first year review process, and there's no exceptions to that rule. So I really encourage students and families to do their research about the deadlines that a school has, about what you need to do in order to be considered for need-based, for merit-based aid, and to anticipate that no matter how much a person on the other side of the phone may want to be able to make an exception to a policy, they cannot because of the kind of environment that we're working within. So that is the biggest, I think, pitfall that I see is that a student or family will think, it's less so the students and it's very often the parents will think that, if I call, they will find an extra spot in the full tour for me. Or if I call, they will let my student apply past a deadline. And that is not the world that we're operating within at NYU.
Well, we appreciate that. As you mentioned, it's a highly academic applicant pool. I didn't know that you were the largest private university in the United States, so I appreciate you mentioning that. And I also want to just add that, we've talked about this in different episodes. The first 20%, if you could find that first 20% of the students that are not admitted, in many ways, their profile is probably similar to the students that are admitted.
Absolutely.
But, right, you would agree. And, there's something that you spoke about last time, Arianna, which is the institutional priorities. So I think going into this process, and please, Arianna, because you're in it and I'm asking, I think it's wise to go into this process controlling what you can control.
Absolutely.
And understanding that there are institutional priorities that are out of your control in many cases. And like I said, the first 20% of the students that are rejected, those students' profiles are probably no different than the students that were fortunate enough to be admitted. What do you have to say regarding that, Arianna? Do you agree or?
I do agree. We're in a position at NYU to have such a talented and dynamic applicant pool that so very often, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're not able to have happy news to share with every student that could come to NYU and do the academic work.
Right.
So it means tough choices sometimes for our admissions counselors. It means that we're not able to welcome everybody to the NYU community. But it does mean that we've tried really hard and worked really hard to create a review process that we're really proud of and that we think allows us to be able to meet the goals of the university and create a diverse, dynamic, innovative class of students year over year. And that's something that is really, really very exciting for us at NYU. And I think I recognize all the time how lucky I am to work at a place that I'm so proud to call so I'm so proud to work for.
Well, it absolutely is awesome. And this has been a terrific follow-up conversation. Arianna, I can't thank you enough. And before we get to the last question, I do have to ask, Arianna, is there a question that I didn't ask that you wish I had, or perhaps a topic that just didn't come up in today's conversation that you wish to share with us now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I meant to talk about it in literally the second question, and we just sort of walked away from it just because our conversation is flowing so well, John. But one of the things that we're really excited about at NYU is a new financial aid program called NYU Promise. So we just announced this in October as part of President Mills's inaugural address. So we have been meeting full need for students that has been admitted for the last few years. But we are now making a couple of changes to our financial aid program at NYU. So we're continuing to meet full need, but we're now going to be meeting starting in the fall of 2024 for all new students admitted as first-year students. We're going to be meeting full need without any loans in our financial aid packages. So it's just going to be any NYU grants that a student may qualify for, any federal grants that a student may qualify for, and then the opportunity to work on campus as part of a work study, sort of self-help component. So we're going to be meeting 100% of a student's demonstrated need with just the grants and the opportunity to work on campus, which is something we're really, really excited about. And that's going to apply to our new first-year students, but also to all current students at NYU as well. So we're adjusting their financial aid packages too. The other new thing is that's part of NYU Promise is that our scholarships are now going to adjust year over year for the increases in tuition at NYU as well. So a student's family contribution will stay pretty consistent year over year now as the scholarships adjust to the increases to tuition. And the other thing about NYU Promise that we're really excited about is that for families who have an income of about $100,000 who also hold typical assets, they can anticipate that their financial aid at NYU will cover at least the cost of tuition.
Wow.
So if they have financial need beyond the cost of tuition, that will be met using, our need-based grants at NYU, any federal programs they qualified for, like we talk about. But I think it's really helpful for families to have that $100,000 number so that they know that an NYU education might not be as out of reach as they might have thought. So we're really excited for what NYU Promise means for students and families. This applies for international students and domestic students equally. It's of course the equivalent of $100,000 US. And we will be continuing to use the CSS profile to make those determinations on a family's eligibility for our need-based aid programs.
Well, that is fantastic. I'm glad I asked the question and
Yes,
that
I know.
you shared all of those very important resources. And of course, again, provide any links and we'll put them in the show notes for the students and the parents. As expected, Arianna, this has been a tremendous follow-up conversation. Unfortunately, it does lead us to the last question, which is, what are your top 3 pieces of advice that you would provide students and their parents getting ready for the college admissions process?
Sure, absolutely. I think one we've already circled on a little bit. Please pay attention to the deadlines. The deadlines for both admission at NYU and for financial aid. The financial aid deadlines, like we talked about, are very strict. For early decision 2, the CSS profile has to be received by January 15th. And for regular decision, the CSS profile has to be received by February 20th. If you're listening to this during some future application cycle for early decision 1, the date is November 15th as well. So just keep those dates in mind. Again, they are very, very strict. You will not have heard back from NYU on your admissions decision before you need to submit the CSS profile. We so often, every year, we have these horrible conversations with families where they say, well, I didn't know I needed to submit it. And now I've been admitted and now I'd like to submit it. Can I submit it? The answer is no.
Right.
So know the
Right.
deadlines, know what it takes for any of the schools that you're interested in to be considered for both need-based aid and merit aid if they have it. There's no merit aid at NYU, but it's really important to know what those deadlines are. The other thing I would say is check your email. We send a lot of very important notifications via email at NYU. That's where we'll email you over and over again to say, hey, have you applied for financial aid? Or, hey, you have not submitted your self-reported academic record. Or, hey, you've been invited for a callback. All that goes through the email address that you've given us on the common application. So whatever that email address is, check it regularly, so that you know that you're not missing any important updates from NYU or from any of the other schools that you've applied to. And then the last piece of advice I would give is less procedural and more sort of personal. I want to acknowledge that we know that you're putting a lot of yourself into this process. You're putting a lot of yourself into the essays that you're writing. You've put a lot of time and energy into your extracurricular activities, into cultivating your relationships with the people in your life who you might be asking for a letter of recommendation. We know that there's so much of yourself that has gone into you applying to NYU or any other school. And I want to say that regardless of what happens with the admissions decision, what NYU says or another school says can never take away that time and effort, can never take away from what you contribute and have contributed and will contribute to the world around you. Can never take away from who you are as an individual. This might be one of the first times in your life that you're getting news that you don't anticipate. And if this is one of the first times in your life that you're in a situation like this, I'm, I know that it can be really hard to get those rejections. I still can remember sitting, getting the little envelope in the mail and sitting on the stairs at my house and reading that I hadn't been admitted to a school I wanted to go to. And also knowing that if I had gone to that school, I would be in a totally different world. Would I
Right.
even work in admissions in this job that I
Right.
love so much? Would I have, met my best friends? Would I have met my husband?
Right.
No. We were actually I was just talking about that with my family and my in-laws, actually, that if I had gone to a different undergrad, my life would be so different. And I really fully believe that everything works out the way that it's supposed to. And when you're in the midst of this process, it can be hard to remember that. But just know that, like we talked about a little bit earlier, we have to sometimes make really tough decisions for really deserving candidates. And that we know that you're going to continue wherever it is that you end up going to college, having an incredible experience and making an impact and getting a great job and having the ability to travel and study away and do research and engage in entrepreneurship. All those things are going to be available to you at so many different schools and colleges across the US and really across the world. So just keep that in mind when it can feel like you're really bogged down in the midst of this process. And if I can add one last piece of advice.
Absolutely. Is this number 4 now?
This is number 4. This is number 4.
That's fine.
That just to keep an open mind. Consider places outside of the U.S. Consider places in the United States you've never heard of, or in a state halfway across the country. There are so many incredible institutions that are available to you and that you can learn about and research. Lean on your college counselors. They spent a lot of time and effort learning about and researching these institutions. Lean on the other episodes from the CAP. There have been so many incredible institutions that have come and been featured on here to tell you that talk about their experiences that they offer for students. I hope that you've learned from that there are a lot of institutions where you could have a really wonderful time in college. And so just keep that in the back of your mind that, even if it's a school you've never heard of before, that doesn't mean that it's not a place where you could have an incredible experience. So that's it. I'll stop there.
Well, that's not just it. Those are tremendous pieces of advice. You emphasize the deadlines, which are extremely important, students and parents, not only for the actual application, but for merit-based scholarships and things like that. I'm glad that you mentioned checking your email because, one piece of advice that's come up time and time again throughout the episodes is the fact that it would be very important to students come up with your own email specific to the college process. Many students use the email that their high school has given to them. Mm-hmm. Those emails, there's a lot of firewalls, there's a lot of issues, they work, they don't work. So I think it's good advice to create a separate email that you're going to check regularly for the college process. And I love your last piece, which is things happen for a reason. And I think it's really important for students to understand that there is a school for everyone out there.
Absolutely.
But not every single school is for every single person. So, for example, if ABC University is in a rural area and it's one of those schools that, is on that top 100 list, but you don't want to be in a rural area, guess what? That school is not for you. It might be for your best friend. It might be where a parent went. But students, try to enjoy this process and know that there's about 4,000 colleges and universities throughout the United States alone. So there's a lot of great schools out there. So enjoy it. And Arianna, I can't thank you enough for coming back. This has been phenomenal, as I knew it would be. And I'm so happy as I know that this conversation, like episode 28, certainly going to help so many students and their parents as they navigate through this process. So thank you so much, Arianna.
Thanks so much for having me, John. And best of luck, everybody, as you're going through this process.
Absolutely. Good luck to everyone and best wishes out there. Take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP.